Why would someone seal off a cabin in a hurry just hours before a ship went down? Think about that for a second. Out of all the things happening during an emergency, somebody took the time to lock up one specific room and make sure nobody could get back inside. That's not normal. That's not part of any evacuation plan. That's someone hiding something. And whatever it was stayed hidden for a very long time. What you're about to hear doesn't show up in the official reports. It wasn't part of the investigation. It wasn't mentioned in the survivor interviews. This is about what got left behind when everyone was trying to save their own lives. This is about a cabin that wasn't supposed to be found. July 1956. The SS Andrea Doria was one of the most beautiful ocean liners in the world. She carried over 1,000 people across the Atlantic. Passengers trusted her. Crew members were proud to work on her. She was supposed to be unsinkable. Then, one foggy night off the coast of Massachusetts, another ship crashed right into her side. The impact tore a massive hole in the hull. Water poured in fast. The ship started leaning so badly that half the lifeboats couldn't even be lowered. People were screaming, running, grabbing whatever they could carry. Families got separated in the chaos. Some passengers jumped into the freezing ocean. Others clung to railings as the deck tilted more and more. Crew members made split-second decisions, and not all of them made sense later. In a disaster like that, things get messy. Mistakes happen, secrets get buried, and sometimes things get locked away on purpose. The SS Andrea Doria sank 11 hours after the collision. She went down in 250 feet of water. For decades, divers have explored the wreck. It's dangerous down there. The ship is falling apart. Visibility is terrible. Currents are strong. But divers keep going back because the wreck still holds mysteries. They find jewelry, dishes, luggage, personal belongings frozen in time. Every dive reveals something new. And one day, 70 years after the sinking, a diver noticed something that didn't fit. A cabin with its door still shut. Most cabins on the wreck are wide open, doors torn off, interiors gutted by decades of corrosion and curious divers. But this one was different. The door was closed tight like someone wanted it to stay that way. The diver checked his equipment, adjusted his lights, and approached carefully. The cabin number was still visible, barely, under layers of rust and marine growth. He checked the deck plans later. This cabin was listed as a standard passenger room. Nothing special about it in the records. But down there, in the dark, it felt wrong. The door frame showed signs of forced closure, not damage from the sinking. Not from the collision. This was deliberate. Someone had sealed this cabin from the outside while the ship was still afloat. Why would anyone do that during an evacuation? When every second counts, when people are dying, why waste time locking up one random cabin? The diver decided to go inside. Opening that door took effort. 70 years of pressure and corrosion had fused metal to metal. But when it finally gave way, the scene inside was unlike anything he'd seen on the Andrea Doria before. The cabin was intact, eerily intact. The bed frame still bolted to the wall, a small chair wedged in the corner, a mirror, cracked but still hanging, and silence. Not the usual silence of the ocean floor, but something heavier, like the room itself was holding its breath. Particles drifted in the beam of his flashlight, suspended in the water, moving in slow motion. Everything looked frozen, like the room had been locked in time the moment the door closed. But here's what was strange. There was nothing personal in there. No suitcases, no clothes hanging in the closet, no books, no toiletries, no family photos. In every other cabin on the SS Andrea Doria, you find traces of the people who stayed there. A hairbrush, a pair of shoes, a child's toy. Something. But this cabin was stripped clean. It didn't look like anyone had ever lived in it. Or maybe someone had lived there, but made sure to erase every trace before leaving. Either way, it didn't match the chaos of the evacuation. During the sinking, passengers didn't have time to pack neatly. They ran. They left everything behind. So why was this cabin so empty? The diver moved slowly through the space, careful not to disturb anything. He noticed scratches on the walls. Not random wear and tear. These were deliberate marks, like something heavy had been dragged across the floor and bumped into the walls. Furniture had been moved. The bed frame was slightly off-center. The chair wasn't where it should be according to the standard cabin layout. Someone had rearranged things in a hurry, and there were dents near the door, on the inside, like someone had tried to force it open from within and failed. Or maybe they succeeded, and then someone else sealed it again. The more he looked, the more questions piled up. This wasn't just an abandoned cabin. This was a cabin someone had used for something other than sleeping. 70 years after the Andrea Doria went down, most of the ship's secrets have been uncovered. Salvage operations brought up artifacts. Investigators interviewed survivors. Engineers analyzed the structural damage. But nobody ever mentioned this cabin. It wasn't flagged in the reports. No survivor claimed to have stayed there. No crew member explained why it was sealed. It existed in a blind spot, overlooked, or deliberately ignored. Maybe it seemed unimportant at the time. Maybe whoever sealed it assumed it would never matter again. But here it was, preserved by accident, waiting for someone to ask the right questions. The diver swept his light across the room one more time before leaving. That's when he saw it. In the far corner, bolted to the wall, was a small table. It wasn't part of the original cabin furniture. It had been added later, fixed in place with screws that didn't match the rest of the fittings. The table was small, just big enough to hold a single object, and it was too clean. Everything else in the cabin was covered in sediment, rust, algae. But this table had a thin layer of silt, nothing more. Like it had been protected somehow, or like whatever had been resting on it had kept the surface clear until very recently. The diver leaned closer, his heart pounding in his chest. Resting on that table, still secured by a rusted bracket, was a telegraph key. A manual Morse code transmitter, the kind used for ship-to-ship communication or for emergency signals when the main radio failed. But this one wasn't in the radio room. It was hidden in a passenger cabin on the SS Andrea Doria, and it was connected. Corroded wires ran from the device into the wall, disappearing into the guts of the ship. 70 years of salt water had eaten away at the insulation, but the connection points were still visible. Someone had wired this telegraph into the ship's electrical system, privately, secretly, and then sealed the room so nobody would find it. Why would a telegraph be in a passenger cabin? The Andrea Doria had a fully functioning radio room. Professional operators sent and received messages around the clock. Passengers could send telegrams for a fee. There was no reason for a secondary device to exist, especially not hidden away like this. Unless someone needed to communicate without going through official channels. Maybe they didn't trust the radio operators. Maybe they were sending messages they didn't want anyone else to know about. Or maybe they were trying to receive something. A signal from another ship. A coded transmission meant for their eyes only. 70 years later, there's no way to know for sure. But the existence of that telegraph raises questions nobody thought to ask before. Think about the timing. The naufragio happened fast, but not instantly. After the collision, the ship stayed afloat for 11 hours. That's a long time in an emergency. Long enough for crew members to organize lifeboats, for passengers to gather their valuables, for captains to send distress signals. Long enough for someone to slip into a cabine lacrata and use a hidden telegraph one last time. Maybe they sent a final message. Maybe they tried to call for help from someone specific. Or maybe they destroyed evidence. Tore out pages, smashed equipment, erased records, then locked the door and walked away, knowing the ship would take their secret to the bottom. The diver reported his findings to a small group of wreck researchers. They compared notes, checked passenger lists, reviewed crew assignments. Nothing matched. The cabin wasn't registered to anyone important. No VIPs, no military personnel, no government officials, just a standard room on a passenger deck. But that's what makes it so strange. If this was some kind of covert operation, why use a random cabin instead of a secure location? Maybe that was the point. Hide in plain sight. Blend in with the ordinary passengers. Conduct your business quietly, and nobody notices until it's too late. 70 anos depois were left guessing. Some people think the telegraph was part of a backup communication system. Maybe the crew installed it as a precaution in case the main radio failed. But that doesn't explain why it was in a passenger cabin, or why the room was sealed. Others believe it was used for smuggling, secret messages coordinating illegal cargo drops, or signaling ships that weren't supposed to be tracked. The Andrea Doria carried wealthy passengers, expensive art, valuable cargo. Maybe someone on board had a side operation running, a private deal that went wrong when the ship sank. But again, sealing the cabin doesn't fit. If you're smuggling, you want quick access, not a locked room. Then there's the darker theory, that someone on the SS Andrea Doria was communicating with the ship that hit her, that the collision wasn't an accident, that the fog, the speed, the angle of impact were all too convenient, and that someone on board knew it was coming, tried to warn others or tried to stop it, and failed. So they locked themselves in a cabin lacrata with a telegraph and sent one last desperate message before the ship went down. It's a theory with no evidence, just the existence of that telegraph in a place it shouldn't be, and the fact that somebody went out of their way to hide it. 70 years later, it's impossible to prove, but it's also impossible to ignore. The truth is, we'll probably never know what that telegraph was used for. The wires are corroded beyond repair. Any written records that might have explained it sank with the ship or were destroyed in the chaos. The people who knew the truth are gone. All we have is the physical evidence, a device that shouldn't exist, in a room that was sealed for a reason, on a ship that went down under circumstances that still spark debate 70 annos depois. Maybe it was nothing, a forgotten experiment, a crew member's personal project, a piece of equipment stored temporarily and never retrieved. Or maybe it was something much bigger, a secret that someone was willing to die to protect, or a mistake that someone tried very hard to erase. The diver who found the telegraph went back to the wreck several times after that. He studied the cabin from every angle, took measurements, photographed every detail. He even tried to trace the wires, following them through the walls as far as he could before the ship's structure blocked his way. But 70 years of decay made it impossible to map the full circuit. The wires vanished into collapsed sections, flooded compartments, areas too dangerous to explore. Whatever system that telegraph was connected to, it's gone now, destroyed by time and salt water. The only thing left is the device itself, still sitting on that small table in a sealed cabin, waiting for someone to finally understand what it meant. Here's what we know for sure. The SS Andrea Doria sank on July 26, 1956. Over 1,700 people were evacuated. 51 died. The ship rests in the Atlantic, slowly disintegrating. And somewhere inside that wreck, in a cabin that wasn't supposed to be found, is a telegraph that wasn't supposed to be there. Everything else is speculation. But sometimes speculation is all we have. Sometimes the absence of answers is the most haunting part of the story, because it means something happened that was important enough to hide, but not important enough to remember. Or maybe it was too important to remember. Maybe the people involved decided it was safer to let the secret sink with the Andrea Doria and never speak of it again. If you were on that ship in those final hours and you knew about the cabine lacrata, would you say something? Would you risk your life going back to destroy evidence or recover a message? Or would you let it go, trusting the ocean to keep your secret forever? 70 years after the naufragio, those questions don't have easy answers, but they matter. Because every disaster leaves behind more than wreckage. It leaves behind choices, decisions made in moments of panic, fear, or desperation. And sometimes those decisions create mysteries that outlast the people who made them. The telegraph in the sealed cabin is one of those mysteries. It's small. It's strange. It doesn't fit the official story. But it's real. And it's still down there waiting. Maybe one day someone will figure out what it was really for. Maybe new technology will allow divers to recover it, restore it, analyze it in ways we can't right now. Or maybe it will stay lost, another ghost story from the Andrea Doria, another piece of the puzzle that never quite fits. But for now, it's a reminder that even the most well-documented disasters still hold secrets. Even after 70 annos depois, even after countless dives and investigations, there are still rooms that haven't been opened, questions that haven't been asked, and stories that haven't been told. So when you think about the SS Andrea Doria, don't just think about the collision or the rescue or the lives lost. Think about that cabin. Think about the person who sealed it. Think about the telegraph on the table and the wires running into the walls. Think about the message that might have been sent, or the message that was never received. And ask yourself, what else is down there? hidden in the wreckage, waiting for someone to notice. Because the ocean doesn't give up its secrets easily, and some mysteries, it seems, are meant to stay buried. Unless you're willing to dive deep enough, look close enough, and ask the questions nobody else wants to ask. 70 years after the Andrea Doria went down, that sealed cabin is still there, still silent, still holding on to whatever truth it was meant to protect. And maybe that's exactly where it belongs.